last night, thousands of movie fans across the country got to go see a special advanced fan screening of the brand new Dune Part Two. Now, I loved Dune Part One. I thought it was incredible. It won more Academy Awards than any other film that year, and it was setting something up where we knew where Dune was going and could potentially be very special. So last night, and by the way, I think the first Dune movie became my wife Anne's number 2 all-time favorite movie. And so last night, getting ready to go to see Dune 2, that's Anne's outfit. That's my wife getting ready for us to head out the door. And she was so excited. She's like, we were in Vegas this weekend. And like every day she goes, it's like 48 more hours until we go see Dune. It's 37 more hours until we see Dune. It was just one big, massive countdown for Dune. By the way, setting us up for a lot of potential disappointment. Because the first reactions have been out of the world. The reviews come. I believe it's still sitting at a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. We're hearing some people throw around phrases like possibly the greatest sci-fi movie ever made, a new bar standard for what sci-fi can be, a masterclass in filmmaking, like all this kind of stuff, right? Hyping it up to the point that it was very possible I could walk out of the theater being kind of disappointed. But we went to go see Dune 2. And it opens with spice, or power over spice is power over all. Like, cool. Look, just going to say it. This is one of the best movies ever made. Just going to say it. Now, look, whether I still feel that way 3 months from now, once I watch it 2 or 3 more times and ponder it a little bit, but as of right now, this to me is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And you know what, Rob? To me, I had the feeling walking out of it that I had the feeling walking out of Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, of thinking I just saw one of the greatest overall examples of the totality of the filmmaking achievement, right? Because you go back to Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, I don't think it's necessarily the greatest film of all time, but when you look at the individual achievements of what it did with acting, story, cinematography, directing. Like I just had, at that point, I'd never seen a movie that just aced it on with all those fronts. And I've said for a long time, I think it's one of the greatest achievements ever in filmmaking history. And I had that same feeling coming out of Dune Part 2. I love the character depth, the intrigue, the mythology building of the first Dune, and which admittedly, Rob, is not for everybody. A lot of people love explosions and boobies, and I get that. And listen, I love my Kellogg's Frosted Flakes kind of movies. I do. I eat them up. I love them. They're great. But every once in a while, too, it's nice to get a hit of something of a dish a little bit more complex, has a little bit more going for it, a little more depth to it. You know what I mean? And there's some people that just like me, the Frosted Flakes, and that's fine. But oh my God, I was simply not prepared for how they were able to take that mythology building to another level, how they were able to take the world building to another level, how they were able to take these wonderfully fascinating characters and give them even more depth and complexity, all while bringing in new characters that just up the game even more. Austin Butler, for example, in this blew my mind. And listen, you guys know I already think that Timothee Chalamet is one of the world's best right now, that I think Timothee Chalamet has the potential to maybe someday be the next Daniel Day-Lewis. But he showed me things in this movie even I didn't think he was capable of. Like, we all saw this little scene in a trailer when he turns to the Reverend Mother, silence! And it's like, oh! And by the way, my theater that I was in last night, when Paul Atreides is like, silence to her, like the whole theater we were in lost their mind.
Me
it was
too.
A great moment. But there's another scene when he's like addressing the War Council of the Fremen. And Timothée Chalamet just goes to a level in that scene of power and intensity that I haven't really seen him do before.
Fundamentalists in the South.
Oh my God, like I'm just sitting there like drooling. Javier Bardem rules in this thing, like so good. Paul's mother, Rebecca Ferguson. Just there's something that I'm not. Some of you know the books, but I'm not going to spoil it. Something happens to her that creates kind of a character shift in her, and Rebecca nails it.
Oh yeah,
so good. Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen. Crazy good. Then you bring in somebody like Florence Pugh, who played the stalwart princess a little bit, played it really solid.
She's
really
such
great.
a goddess.
The Anya Taylor-Joy cameo was perfect.
And Leah Seydoux.
Oh my God.
Leah Seydoux.
As another one of the Bene Gesserit. I look, and then the world building, the politics, the intrigue, and then let me talk about this: the hand-to-hand combat in this movie. I have not seen the speed and coordination in hand-to-hand combat. What was the dude's name in the 80s? Jeff Speakman? Speakman. Remember the old Jeff Speakman? Like, that dude was stupid fast. I haven't seen that kind of speed in hand-to-hand combat sequences in a long. It looked like when Timothee Chalamet and Austin Butler are. I'm like, holy crap! You know what it made? The Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Darth Maul fight at the end of The Force Awakens or The Phantom Menace looked like it was in slow motion. Mm-hmm. And it was intense and breathtaking. And this is just one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And I said this coming out of the theater and I didn't have this. I love the first Dune, but I didn't have this feeling coming out of the first Dune. I came and I said this: every few years, not every couple of months, not every year, but every few years, I see a movie that reminds me of why I love the movies. And Rob, Dune Part Two is one of these movies that reminds us of why we love the movies and reminds us about how good and powerful and moving and how great the art can be. And it couldn't have come at a better time. I do not think it's going to be for everybody. It's not going to be for everybody. A lot of people don't want thinking movies. They don't. I'm sorry, that sounded like I'm trying to talk down, and I don't mean it. But a lot of people don't want that kind of stuff. Some people feel that this type of material works better in a book, right? And that's fair. That's fair. It's not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to gush it the way I have. But this movie is not perfect, but as near to perfect as a film I have seen in years. And again, Oppenheimer better thank the Oscar gods that Dune moved out of 2023, because it wouldn't even be a race. And you know, I love Oppenheimer. I love this movie. It is my pick to win Best Picture. I think it's fantastic. It wouldn't even be a race to me. I mean, Dune is just such. This is one of these movies, Rob. I think you and I, if we do some reunion podcast on YouTube 10 years from now, I think we are still going to be talking about Dune 2. Anyway, you had a chance to go into the theater and see it. You and I haven't talked about it since, but what did you think of Dune 2?
When this movie was over in the theater, I wanted to weep because it took me back to when I was 10 years old and I saw Star Wars for the first time. And the thing about Star Wars that people forget is before Star Wars, there was nothing analogous in cinema history that was anything like. And what Star Wars did was it created a reality, a science fiction reality that was not possible before because of the filmmaking techniques. And I think that's why people were so stunned by it then. Now, even though we had Dune 1, which I loved, I know that's not for everybody. John, like everything you said, if anything, you've undersold what this movie has done. You know, I always say verisimilitude. This is the most, of all the fantasy films, science fiction films ever made, this one has the most verisimilitude. It also, my other favorite word that I don't use nearly enough is gobsmacked. That's a British word. I love that word. I sat in this theater and look, this movie starts, it's a slow burn. It starts out right after Dune 1 ends, like literally right after Dune 1 ends. I was sitting in the theater, dude, I felt like the hand of God reach into my soul and give me, what this movie does is it takes the literary, it takes the immersive, imagination effect that reading a great science fiction novel does to you. And you're watching imagery that matches what's happening in your imagination when you read a book, and it shows it to you. You know, it's like when you see a spaceship in a movie pull into orbit around a planet. It could look good. In this movie, when it happens, the cosmic grandeur of a giant spaceship moving into orbit around a planet becomes almost I felt like I was at a revival. Like the ultimate Southern Baptist, where there's some fiery preacher in the deep South going, and you will feel the presence of the Lord. And I'm like, yes, I do, because I really
And everyone's like, sit down in front.
I know. But this film, honest to God, I'm looking at this going, the imagery here, Greg Fraser, you know, I talked to Greg Fraser, I interviewed him on this channel.
That's
you
right.
can watch the interview.
For Designing Hollywood.
And he's like, he said to me, he's like, you know, I watched this movie and I'm like, I shot this movie. But when I sat down and watched it, I'm like, this movie's incredible. And I'm like, I was like, okay, now I get it. I mean, if the DP of this movie, who shot all these images, sat down and was like, I can't believe. I'm like, I don't think this sets a new bar. And I'm thinking, John, in terms of Hollywood filmmaking, it made me think of the 50s when they had to compete against television. And they made widescreen filmmaking possible. This kind of filmmaking can compete with AI. You know, we've got the onslaught of AI, because I got to tell you, human beings understanding how to work at this scale, and Villeneuve, remember, this is his fourth. He might be the greatest sci-fi filmmaker ever. Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, Dune 1 and 2. I mean, he's working at a level.
He's making a case.
He's working at a level nobody can work at, because in terms of that verisimilitude, in terms of making things feel real, I mean, you see it in the trailer, even when they're under the spice harvester and you have one of those giant Harkonnen ships blow up and it's falling and you see him running. You know, it's in the trailer. That shot.
Yeah.
When you see it on the screen, I was just like,
Stunning.
oh my God. I tried to go online last night and do a review of this movie. Like right now, I couldn't even articulate it. I started recording. I couldn't even get a sentence out trying to talk about this movie. And to me, as a science fiction literature fan, I'm like, oh my God, give Denis Villeneuve all of the science fiction books. Give him Dan Simmons' Hyperion. Give him Arthur Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama. Give him anything. I mean, my God, this movie's unbelievable.
Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, Mint Mobile. On average, it takes about 30 days for a person to break their New Year's resolution. So if saving money was on your 2024 list, your odds aren't looking that great. Luckily, I have a 100% guaranteed way to save you money this year. Just switch to Mint Mobile. For a limited time, wireless plans from Mint Mobile are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. That's unlimited talk, text, and data for $15 a month. I've told you guys many times that after switching to Mint Mobile, I am spending less than a third on my cell bill than I used to with a major carrier. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. All Mint plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And don't worry about having to change phones or numbers. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. So guys, to get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bills to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Here's a couple things too I want to mention about the film. There may be those who are book purists and who know the books very well, liken unto when Peter Jackson put out The Lord of the Rings. Some of the book purists were blah, 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 Tom Bombadil, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
Arwen wasn't
That's
there,
what
right?
adaptation's about.
Rob and I had a quick discussion this morning, and I mentioned this to Rob, that there are, for those who know the books, there are going to be a couple of big differences from the books to the movie. Denis Villeneuve made adaptation because he understood this is not a book that we're sitting down and reading. This is a screen presentation. And I said to Rob this morning, every single change, and I can already hear some of the book there, blah, 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 preborn, blah, 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 you know, the prophecy.
Oh, that was the great. I love that.
Right. And so they definitely made changes, but because they needed to make changes because they needed to make the best movie possible. And something in the book worked better in the book, and they made. But Rob, every single one of the changes that they made from the book, and there's not a ton of them, but there are some significant ones. Every single change they made from the book made the movie better. And how did you feel about that? As someone who's loved the
I'm
books.
with you. I mean, look, everything you have to adapt to make from one medium to another, and you have to really understand. The preborn thing was amazing. The heel turn in this movie, and I'll just say the heel turn.
Right, yeah.
Because for those of you who don't know the story of Dune, there's a big, big, big heel turn. And when you get to that, like you were saying, I'm like, I was going back and the performance, I'm like, oh, but there's one thing that he does. He when he says something to a character and then turns and does something else with that character that he just talked to, you're going, oh no.
Are you talking at the end in the throne room? Dude, the audience, because I knew it was coming, and I warned Ann. I said in advance, Ann, just so you know, there's something that's going to probably happen near the end of the movie that you might not be too happy with. And we're sitting there, and it happens.
Bro.
And Ray was there in the theater with me. He can attest to this. I have never heard a gasp in a movie theater. Like you heard, like all the air got sucked out of the room because at one moment, everybody in that theater in unison was... like was shocked
because they don't.
They didn't know. They didn't know it was coming.
And I have to say, somebody brought up the fact. I mean, there's a couple of things in here, like the end of the movie has a Godfather 2-esque ending. That's a little different than people might expect. I'm like, because somebody pointed out, the end is perfect because if you remember how Dune 1 opens.
Yep.
And then you get to there's one character that is so effed from the journey they take from the beginning of Dune 1. And because when I first read the Dune 1 script, it opened differently than the screenplay that I wrote. And I was like, now the fact that the way that Dune 1 opens and the way Dune 2 ends, I'm like, oh my God. I was sitting in the theater going, wow, this poor character.
And can I just mention this too? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and proclaim Denis is the best director in the world right now. He might be, but I'm not going to say that right now. But I will say this: when you look at Arrival, when you look at what's the one he did with Hugh Jackman with
Prisoners.
Prisoner. When you look at Prisoners,
Sicario.
When you look at Sicario, when you look at Dune
Enemy,
Part 1,
even in Cindy's,
I think he's the best director in the world with his sense of pacing. Because this movie was damn near 3 hours long.
Slow burn, too.
And yet paced so beautifully that when it ended, I was like, there was no way that movie was that long. But I'm going to say this, Rob. I'm going to say this. I know what happens in Dune Messiah. I don't want him to make Dune Messiah.
I do.
But no, what I mean is because I don't like Dune Messiah.
Right. Well, yeah.
But when you understand that there are many themes to Dune, but one of the big overall themes to Dune is that it's a cautionary tale about messianic figures.
Yes.
And I just want this to end with Dune Part Two. I don't want them to go where Dune Messiah is going to go. And I think a lot of the audience... I think there are going to be audiences that Dune 2 might be their favorite movie that get really pissed off about Dune Messiah if they don't already know what happens.
I don't know, man, because I think there's going to be a lot of people that see this as a jihadi call to arms and pro-life. Yeah, until they realize what's coming. You know, and let me ask you one question, though. There's one point in this movie, and Star Wars is very influenced by Dune.
Oh, absolutely.
Very influenced by Dune. But there's one point in this movie where just... involuntarily, this is how, I don't know what this says about me, in my mind, I heard Yoda say, began the Clone Wars have.
I know exactly the moment.
And I was sitting there going, and it was, I'm like, and I loved it. I love that I felt that way, but then I mean, my God, dude, I am so happy I have my Lego Dune Ornithopter because I bought Greg Fraser's Dune book of photographs that Josh Brolin wrote the thing, dude. There's the Art of Dune. Like this, also, to me, this now is a new litmus test for people. Whether I like people or not.
Answer me this: do you like Dune?
Yeah, it's like because you need to have a certain level of intellectual acumen. And because what this does is these movies, I'm always talking about neo-realist films of the 60s or Antonioni's movies or whatever, all the cinema that I grew up watching, art films. This is the perfect distillation of literary art film and just kick-ass, unbelievable verisimilitude sci-fi on a level you've never seen. I've dreamt my whole life after seeing Star Wars for the very first time of seeing something like this. Now, Dune 1, people are like, it's not that different than Dune 1, but the scale, the scale of stuff that you're getting to the point where I can't, dude, I've seen this movie at 7:00 in the morning on Friday. I can't wait. It can't come soon enough.
Like a threat.
I love this movie so much. I love what it represented, but it kind of made me sad because you've got Inarritu, you've got Christopher Nolan, you've got how many people can work at this level? And here's
There's
one
not
thing.
not many.
I know. And I will say this: we now have. I think that like Infinity War and Endgame represent peak comic book. I never thought I'd see anything like those movies in the comic book genre.
Right.
Science fiction never got to that level for me. Lord of the Rings took the fantasy genre
Got it there.
to that level. This took science fiction to a level that I've always wanted, that has been promised, that we've never. Star Wars almost got there. I mean, the original. If Star Wars was the only part of the franchise that existed, I would say Star Wars got there too. But then it had all this other stuff after it.
But that's been over 40 years.
40 years. This dude. This ups the. If anyone's going to make a science fiction movie now, and I love science fiction, but I wouldn't want to be a science fiction director.
Let me tell you the other thought and feeling I had coming out. I had this weird feeling about what it must have felt like, because it was before our time, but what it must have felt like coming out of seeing, when we're talking scale, epic, mastery film, coming out of Ben-Hur for the first time, or coming out of a Spartacus or a Cleopatra for the first time, these giant scale where you think, how on earth did they pull this off? That's what I felt.
Well, they almost bankrupted the studios for those.
Yeah.
You know what I would love to know? Like, okay, you're a Warner Brothers executive, right? And the executives have to weigh in on notes.
Yeah.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall where there's some meeting with executives after seeing this, and some executive goes, well, I had a few notes about character development stuff. And I would love to see like David Zaslav go, all right, you call up Denis Villeneuve and you tell Denis what he. I mean, I can only imagine
and
what.
For all we know, maybe Denis did take some notes.
He might have.
Right?
But I just would. I mean, what do you do? How when you work at a studio, you're running a studio. What do you do when you see something like this that your studio has made?
You know what you do? You back up a dump truck full of Spanish gold to Denis' house and say, please make whatever you want to make.
French.
With our studio.
I want to ask Ray, though, because, Ray is notorious for not being able to hang in with movies for more than 15 minutes. He fell asleep during the hour and a half, Madam Web. And Ray was a little bit dreading going into this because it was close to 3 hours. But if you were in my theater, you often heard Ray Orr's like, what? Ah! Like reacting to this. Ray, this is nearly a 3-hour movie. How did you like Dune?
I'm not familiar with the books at all, so everything that happened was a surprise to me. A lot of the things that turned out to be what they ended up being really was like, whoa. I like the scale of this movie, first of all. Like no one's ever made sand so interesting to me. There was a lot of sand, whatever it's called. There are parts where, there's story building. There's like a chess match going on between the two sides, right? The parts I enjoyed the most was almost like when the Russian guy in John Wick was like, oh, John Wick. And you saw that when something that's so used to being like the powerful is like desperation and panic. I loved those parts of the movie where you could see the other side start feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure. And then on the other end, you start seeing the other side build. All of that was great into like the war that happened and it was so huge. I haven't seen anything on screen like that in a long time.
Braveheart. Like, honestly, it reminded me, there was some stuff in there that reminded me a lot of Braveheart.
Zendaya was the showstopper for me. I love her character. I'm with her all the way through. If there's another Dune movie, whatever. And the sandworms.
Oh, yeah, the worms.
Those ugly things. But man,
And you didn't buy the bucket.
no, I didn't. But seeing those things ride through the desert, it's like a fantastic sight. I would have that as a screensaver.
Can I also say I gotta give it up because I love female characters in movies. I fall in love with just a few in movies, like Grace Kelly in Rear Window. I wish I could have met that character in real life, but she's fictional. She doesn't exist, so I never could. Florence Pugh as Princess Irulan.
So cool.
When she shows up in full-on Princess Bene Gesserit garb in the chainmail, I'm looking at this going, she's a goddess level. When she walks up, I mean, she's in Oppenheimer. She was great in Oppenheimer, and I've always loved Florence Pugh. But my God, and I love her as Yelena in she'll be great in Thunderbolts. But when she shows up there, I'm like, that is one powerful woman.
She carries a classic Hollywood power and presence and elegance all at the same time. Every moment she's on screen in this.
My God.
And Austin Butler was such a threat in that movie.
Oh my God.
Like when he came on, I was like, ooh.
And the Dave Bautista character was handled perfectly.
Right.
Absolutely perfectly. And anyway, listen, we've gone on for almost a half hour.
Dude.
Talking about this. So
Let's go on
we
for another
need to-
hour because it makes me feel good.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do an open spoiler discussion this weekend. I think this weekend, at some point, once it's open publicly and everybody has a chance to see it, I'll have to do an open spoiler discussion, maybe on Sunday for this, because we can just talk for hours and hours and hours and hours on this because it's just that damn good. Again, I'll preface it. No movies for everybody, and that includes Dune 2. I am not guaranteeing you're going to love it because not every movie is for everybody. But it's one of the best movies ever made.
100%.
It's
and put them together.
and Anna and I said that coming out. It's like, I cannot wait for this movie to be on HBO so we can literally set a Saturday aside, sit down, and just watch part 1 and part 2 back to back.
You could for sure because like Return of the King, the extended edition is
Yeah.
about the same amount of time between these two.
I wish, because
together.
there's deleted scenes, I wish Denis Villeneuve would put these together as one epic 5-hour thing and put deleted scenes in there. I would watch this thing forever.
They probably will.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.